It's much easier to solve problems when you can afford to solve the problem. If you're sitting there and you have $1,000 in the bank that you can throw at problems to help solve with your business, you're going to be really limited. You're going to be spending a lot of time on this problem and not a lot of money. Whereas if that number is 100,000 instead of 1,000, it's much easier to say, you know what, I don't know how to do this. I'm going to hire someone to figure it out. And maybe it's going to cost me $5,000. Much easier to say yes to that when I have 100 grand that I can spend and not just a grand that I can spend.
This is Get UNSTUCK Podcast, a podcast for entrepreneurs who prioritize their life first, business second. I'm Mutita Panmook, your host, who dedicates my life to designing and building a business that supports lifestyle. We will learn together from entrepreneurs around the world how they overcome their life challenges, their business obstacles, and yet still get unstuck from the hamster wheel of burying themselves into their business. Because time is the number one commodity in the world that you cannot get back once it's gone. So let's shorten the learning curve and see how can we prioritize better. Let's get unstuck. Hi, Get Unstuck Nation. So today, very interesting guest again in Get Unstuck Radio. So please welcome Jarod Spiewak. He's an international speaker, founder and CEO of Comet Fuel, where he helps service and SaaS business owners scale to 5 to 10 million US dollar a year by turning clicks to cash. So please welcome Jarod here to Get Unstuck Radio today. Hi, Jarod. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming to Get Unstuck Radio today. I believe that many people are going to feel get unstuck from where they are right now because it's going to be fun regarding to scaling today.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it.
So before we get to the good stuff, how you started your entrepreneurial journey though?
Oh, I mean, it's a long story, but I'll give you the short version, but I'm happy to dive deeper if you want to. The very first thing I ever did, I was in 5th grade. I was watching a lot of like 80s and 90s horror movies that a lot of my friends weren't allowed to watch because, I was just watching whatever my dad was watching. And I would write up one-page stories stealing the plot of that movie, killing off my friends with the place always being the school, and I would sell copies of that story for $1. And that was my very first entrepreneurial endeavor. Fast forward to when I was about 14, I started writing online, started teaching myself some marketing. Then that transitioned to me freelancing, working for an agency, worked in corporate America for a little bit. And then eventually I went, well, I've been freelancing as SEO at the time. I have all these clients. What's the next step for me? So I went from full-time down to part-time, down to no time. And then I started what was called Blue Dog Media, which eventually rebranded into Comet Fuel in 2020, where we transitioned from focusing on SEO, which was eventually SEO and Google Ads, to now just Google Ads. And that has both exploded both our business, but also our clients' businesses.
Why you shift from SEO to like full-on Google Ads?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because we never really intended to. The goal was always SEO. That was my background. And over time, because we were the Google people, clients would ask, oh, can you also run our Google ads? And I said, no. And then they said, well, we really don't like who we're working with now, but we like working with you. So can you please take a look? Sure, why not? So we started working with some of our existing clients. We weren't offering this as a service, but just kind of as a sure, we like you, we like working with you, you like working with us, we'll help you out here. Over time, what we saw was that on Google Ads, we were helping our clients' businesses grow faster and more predictably than we were with SEO, which the typical pitch is, hey, pay somebody thousands of dollars a month for 3, 6, 12 months. And then you'll find out if what you've been paying for is working or not. So we started to have some of our existing clients stop investing in SEO to put that spend towards Google Ads. And then at that point, we said, well, we might as well just start offering this as a service. As our client base increased, we made the decision to basically partner with a very good friend of mine and send all of our SEO clients to him so that he can focus on SEO, which is what all his business does. And then we can focus on Google Ads, which is all our business does.
Oh, I get it now. So in that case, do you think when a company plan on marketing, which one they should focus first, whether paid marketing or advertisement or the organic part? which one would you recommend or considering in terms of like strategy?
For most businesses, and of course I'm going to have bias here, for most businesses, I would recommend paid before organic because it's going to be more, it's faster, it's more predictable, and it's easier to measure. If on the organic side, it takes longer to see results. It's going to take a lot longer to know if the strategy that you're using is even working. And so if you're in a position where you have limited capital, you have limited time, you have limited marketing spend, organic, in my opinion, is a high risk. Now, over time, you'll want to start including organic into your overall marketing mix. But in general, for the vast majority of businesses, paid is going to be, in most cases, a better starting point, in my opinion.
Because at some point in my company, I used to like compare this to actually the costs are pretty much around the same. Like if I do both along the line, like as a baseline, if like going along at the same time, which is crazy to think about that. Like,
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
It kind of depends on the strategy that you're applying. One of the main benefits that I think paid has is its easeability, if you will, in scaling. In that it's if you're spending $100 a day on a particular keyword, and you know that you're spending $100 a day and you're making $500 a day because of that, there are ways for you to measure. How can I get this from $100 a day to $1,000 a day, let's say? And you might be able to do that. We've worked with businesses who've been able to do that in the course of weeks or a couple of months. Not every business will be able to scale that quickly. Whereas for other channels, especially on the organic, whether that's organic in terms of Google, organic in terms of social media growth, what have you, you might be putting in all that time and effort to scale for weeks, months, years, what have you, and then you're waiting around to see when that growth happens. But on paid, it's increased budget to increase your input, which then is going to increase your output.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking that, you mentioned scaling, but then when okay, we're talking about ROI here. Everything in investment, right? We're talking about money, but how can we know that we should invest more in the current marketing strategy that we are doing currently?
The way that I look at it is fairly simplistically. If I am spending $1 and I'm making $5 and I want to be making more money in general, then I want to put more money into whatever is making me money, which is why one of the advantages of paid is the scalability of how easy it is to just increase what you are spending per day, as opposed to more content on the site, more links on the site, and see what happens as a result of that. So when it comes to are you ready to scale it? Are you happy with the return that you're getting from this marketing channel? If not, maybe you want to work on that a little bit before you start throwing more money at something that you're not very happy with the performance on. But when you're happy with the performance, sometimes it's as easy as just increasing, taking the 5 seconds to increase daily spend from 100 to 120. See what happens. 100 to 150, see what happens, however aggressive you want to be.
And is this the only decision that we have to like take a look at, or there are other factors that we should concern regarding to paid advertisement?
Yeah, I mean, there's, depending on how complex we want to get, there's going to be thousands of different considerations that you're going to make. But if you're just trying to figure out how do I increase the revenue of my overall business, and you believe that the path of least resistance to doing that is not increasing pricing, is not increasing your retention rate, but is increasing your lead gen, then I would first look at, if I'm happy with the result, yes, could we talk about improving the conversion rate on my website? Could we talk about improving the click-through rate of the ads? Of course. But if we're already happy, spending $1, making $3, $4, $5, let's increase that first. Everything else is just a bonus on top of that. If we go from spending $1 making $3 to spending $1 making $4, that's great. But I don't want to have my business stuck at a much smaller business for a longer period of time because I spend months trying to improve that return. Where for me, if I'm like, great, I can triple the growth of my business while having this predictable $1 into $3, great. Once I get to a point in my business is struggling to scale due to operations, we're running into a hiring issue, we're running into a retention issue, or we're not running into a lead gen issue. That's when, for me, it becomes more important to turn that $1 into $3 into $1 into $5.
Oh, so we need to solve this first. If not, there will be a cash problem, of course, right?
Of course, it's much easier to solve problems when you can afford to solve the problem. If you're sitting there and you have $1,000 in the bank that you can throw at problems to help solve with your business, you're going to be really limited. You're going to be spending a lot of time on this problem and not a lot of money. Whereas if that number is 100,000 instead of 1,000, it's much easier to say, you know what, I don't know how to do this. I'm going to hire someone to figure it out. And maybe it's going to cost me $5,000. Much easier to say yes to that when I have 100 grand that I can spend and not just $1,000 that I can spend.
Oh, that's gonna get right there. Oh, what you say is so interesting. Usually when they have when it's already working, because definitely it's gonna get result. Like one is working, it's gonna keep working because you already built a money making machine, right? Like it's going to be like boom, 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 like coming in front end because we are making the money making machine, right? So it's keep coming in automatically. And when you don't have back end support, it could be crazy though. So usually how your clients would be prepared or how you prepare your clients that this thing would happen, you should be prepared.
Yeah, so it somewhat depends per business because everybody has a different outlook as to how they look at their business. And the scalability of each business is also different. So as an example, some of the companies that we work with are lead brokers. And this is a company where their ability to scale, think about an insurance broker. They're not the ones handling the insurance claims, the insurance process. What they're helping you do is say, hey, I need car insurance. We're going to go out there to our 5 different providers and we're going to tell you which provider we recommend you work with. Those businesses are incredibly scalable because it's mainly salespeople. It's the agents that determine how many leads they can handle and how much money they're making. That's very different from, let's say, a law firm, in which when you hire a lawyer, they have to be qualified, they have to be certified. When they come, if they're just out of school, it's probably going to take them a couple of years of to be frank, of almost hand-holding them to go, great, you learned theory in school. Now sit back and watch how this process works for the next 2-3 years before we can trust you to be able to go out on your own and do this for us without kind of as much oversight. So depending on what industry you're in is really going to determine how easy it is for you to scale. But the way that I look at it is as you grow, you're going to have different roadblocks. When you're starting out, your roadblock is you need business. You need people to pay you. You have no customers. You need to get people in the door. It doesn't matter anything. It doesn't matter how good of a lawyer you are if you have no one paying you to be a lawyer. And as you get leads in, if you were at a point in time where that's no longer a problem, you have more leads coming in that you can deal with, a couple great things happen. One, you get to choose who you want to work with, or you get to choose your best customers, or it's a lot easier for you to increase your pricing if you have 100 people that want to work with you than if you have 2 people that want to work with you. And as you grow, you're going to get to a point where the roadblock becomes something else. The roadblock is we can't hire fast enough. The roadblock is we are too overwhelmed with the amount of work that we have, and our quality of work is going down because there's not established managers. Our management team really isn't established to be able to quality control what's happening. That's a very good problem to have, because you're in a much better place than where 90% of people will ever get with their business. 90% of people fail at just getting people in the door, getting people interested in wanting to work with them for the first place. So I want to help our clients get to a point where they don't have to worry about getting people in the door, where if they take on 5 more lawyers at their law firm, if they hire 10 more agents at their insurance company, we have a medium that we can just go, great, increase X so that we can get more Y, so that you don't have to worry about the lead gen in the business. You get to worry about the non-sexy stuff, if you will, the establishing management teams, the establishing SOPs, so on and so forth.
And I noticed that you use the word done with you, Google Ads. So for me, I come from like the consulting world. When you say done with you, I'm like, oh, it's agency tasks, but like how you gonna do it with me then? But I really like the way you explain. So can you share with us like how done with you work really looks like in your views?
Yeah, of course. So I think that what is missing in a lot of relationships that I've seen with how the uh, agency world works, if you will, is this: you come on board, you fill out an onboarding form. We have one as well. And we're going to create a campaign based off the information you told us. But when we actually sit down and talk to our clients, they don't know how to communicate with us. They don't know which information to give to us. And so in order for this to be successful, it has to be a collaborative effort. We're experts on Google Ads, but we're not experts on your business. Even if we've worked with 100 companies in your exact industry selling exactly what it is that you sell, I can promise you that will only bring us so far in working with your business, because you're unique. The way that you look at your business is unique. The goals for your business is unique. The goals that you have for your life are unique. If you're someone who wants to build a lifestyle business where you cover your expenses plus a little bit on top of that, and your goal is like, hey, I want to work 4 hours a day and spend the rest of the time with my family, and that's what makes me happy, the way that that person's going to look at their business and growing their business is very different from someone that says, this is a legacy play and I'm going to grow this into being $100 million business, and we're going to have 1,000 employees, 10 offices around the world. So what we need to do is make sure that we're collaborating with our clients to understand sometimes what you need is a volume of people coming into your door because you have a bunch of people sitting around doing nothing all day in your offices. Whereas other times it's higher value customers. We're like, I don't want 100 people giving me $1,000 to make 100 grand. I want 10 people to give me $10,000 because where we are in our business, that's what's more valuable to us this month, this quarter, this year, so on and so forth. And so we want to understand what happens. What happens when your number one salesperson goes on maternity leave for the next 6 months? How does that affect your ad campaign? What happens to your close rates? Do we need to potentially lower ad budget for a bit? Do we need to all accept that our ROI is going to go down because this just absolutely phenomenal person just isn't available right now? Do we perhaps need to pivot and go, well, this person actually specialized in selling service A, so we need to shift more of the strategy to service B for the next 6 months, or what have you. So we want to have an ongoing collaborative relationship with our clients and not just be the people who get paid and send you a report and you never hear from. Sometimes that's fine, but over time, changes are going to happen in your business. We want to be aware with that so we can work with you.
So normally you work like a very long term, like building partnership, like long term contract, like more than 12 months like that.
So the way that we run our services, everything is month to month, but our average client sticks with us for about 2 years.
Yeah, I can see that. So how clicks to cash looks like?
Yeah, so clicks to cash is, at a very high level, it's helping you make sure that you're tracking everything that happens from a click on an ad all the way to cash being in the bank. And this is a particular issue that service-based businesses or any business that generates leads has. If you're an e-commerce business, your sales happen online. And because of that, you can see in any sort of reporting dashboard, whether that's Shopify or whether that's analytics or what have you, roughly how much money you spent, how much money you made. For a service business, though, or a SaaS company that takes demos, some of the sales process happens offline. Somebody fills out a lead capture form, somebody calls your business, and then your sales team has to get in contact with that person. Then maybe a proposal has to be made depending on the business. Then the customer has to agree to pay you. Then the customer has to actually pay you. Then you have to fulfill on that service. And then the customer has to decide not to ask for a refund. Plus about a million other things that have to happen for you to have money and for you to keep that money. So what we want to do is help close that gap. And what's crazy about it is when I get on a call with most businesses, I say, okay, great. How much money did you spend on Google Ads last month? And let's just say, for sake of example, it was $10,000. Okay, great. So you spent 10 grand. How much money did you make? And I either get, I don't know, or I get some sort of answer that boils down to, I don't know. And so the challenge, and then my follow-up is, well, how are you going to determine if we're going to continue to work together? How do you determine if I'm doing a good job? And it's, well, if you're making me money. Great. How do you know if I'm making money? I don't know. And so what we want to do is make sure that we don't just know how many forms are being filled out on a website, how many phone calls are being generated, but how many of those forms or how many of those leads were qualified leads, how many of those leads turned into sales, how much money did those sales pay you? So that when you look at advertising campaign A that drove 50 leads, maybe that only drove 5 customers, where campaign B drove 20 leads, but 15 customers. Most people, based off how they are able to track, would spend more money on that first campaign, less money on that second campaign. But our theory, which makes a ton of sense to me, is that if we can close that gap and know that we can spend more money on campaign B, even if both are profitable, campaign B is so much more profitable, we can help scale the business so much faster and get an ROI that's much higher than we would ever be able to do if we couldn't close that gap. Because then we just have to assume that the value of somebody calling, filling out a form is equal across the board.
Yeah. Who doesn't want to know these details, right? Like, it would be so amazing to see, like, tracing the details back and forth. Like, oh, I know now how this person come from, the whole journey of like conversation, how this money come from, like everything trackable. Yeah. It's amazing. It's always amazing to see this thing, but it's also a lot of work to put in to set up this system though. Let me it's let me fair. It's so headache. I just like think to it like yeah. Especially if you have many software already in the back end and you have to connect everything and make sure that it's not crash between each other. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is why it's a collaborative effort, because the what we don't do, at least on our end, I can't speak to every business, is we want to work within whatever the ecosystem our client has, which means that could be HubSpot, that could be Salesforce, that could be a million different products and services out there that all have different ways and capabilities of tracking. And so on the collaborative front, where we're coming in is figuring out what are you using, how are you tracking, and how can we at the very least help you close that gap for Google Ads? What extra information do we need to send to you? What extra information do you need to send to us? What can we do within your environment? And sometimes we recommend clients change the tools that they're using, which understandably, this is a very large ask because it takes a lot of time and effort and money sometimes to transition these tools. But we want to figure out like how much of that gap can we help you close? And if we can't fully close that gap, we'll make our best recommendations for how you can do that. But ultimately, if you don't want to switch from the current CRM you're using to another, we're going to do the best in our ability to work within the environment that you have.
This is very like ongoing problem that every business have. Software is always happening, like especially every new software that like launched, like solving the new problem, and any owners that's like, oh, this seems to be easier to use, and they just like implement it right away, and oh, it's crashed with another one that we are using, but I already invest in that. So I understand what you're saying, like it's happened every day. Yeah. So last but not least, I want to know what scaling means to you.
Yeah. So to me, what scaling looks like is growing revenue quickly, which could have a limit, not necessarily indefinitely, because like we mentioned, eventually your people are going to be too busy and you're going to run into a hiring crunch or some sort of staffing issue on that front. But what we want to do is not say, great, let's grow revenue 10, 15, 20% a year, especially if you're not at an enterprise level. If you're Amazon and you're growing 10% a year, incredible. That's a lot of growth. Granted, tech companies can grow kind of quickly, AWS, et cetera. For a service-based business, that's typically what we're hearing, though, 10, 15, 20, 25% growth. What we're trying to see is, okay, well, with a heavy focus on a measurable marketing channel and building it to be much more measurable than 99.9% of service businesses ever get to, can we instead help you grow 30, 40, 50, 100, 200% per year, within reason, instead of this, 10, 20, 15% growth. So that's what I'm generally talking about with scaling, is growing your year over year, month over month, quarter over quarter growth, however you want to look at that, much faster than you're used to doing, because of how focused we are on a single marketing channel that we're going to put a lot of effort into measuring it and building it in such a way that we can go from spending $100 a day profitably to $1,000 a day profitably to $10,000 a day profitably, with some of the clients that we work with spending, I want to say like $30,000-$40,000 a day for service-based business in a predictable manner that they can measure the actual output and the actual revenue being generated from that spend.
Okay. So in case anyone want to work with you or follow you, where can they find you then, Jarod?
Yeah, so the best place to find us would be at comet-wheel.com. Pretty standard website, fill out a form, book a call, etc. I'm also very accessible through email. So if you want to email me directly at jarod@comet-wheel.com, that's JAROD @comet-wheel.com.
So everything will be put in the description below, everyone. And yeah, I hope you get unstuck and able to see better of how you can pick only one marketing channel and able to scale your business today. So thank you, Jarod, to joining Get Unstuck Radio today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I hope this episode inspires you wherever you are in your entrepreneurial journey so that you can have your business that supports your lifestyle. Get a show note at getunstuckmethod.com/podcast. Review what we have learned together today and start implementing right now. See it by yourself. The result of your consistent action are worth it. You deserve the freedom to enjoy your life. Until the next episode, let's get unstuck.